Hello and welcome to Haunted Montreal's Spooky Story Sessions. I'm your host, Holly Rhiannon, and today I'm going to tell you about the Old Montreal prison cells. Here at Haunted Montreal, we bring you ghost stories in both English and French every Saturday. Before we get into today's story, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button so you get notified every time we've got a new tale to share. And hey, if you're already subscribed, thank you. It's like you're haunting me or something. Consensual haunting. Is that a thing? I guess it is now. Sorry, let's get into today's story. Today, we're focusing on research carried out by Haunted Montreal founder Donovan King into the old dungeon that lurks below Place Vauquelin in Old Montreal. Originally part of Montreal Prison, the jail cells are rumored to be haunted by criminals long since executed on the site. Place Vauquelin is a picturesque square in historic Old Montreal that overlooks a storied military field, the Champ de Mars. Tourists often linger here, snapping photos by the beautiful fountain and reading the historical plaques on Old City Hall and the Old Courthouse. A set of staircases leads people down to the Champ de Mars. What the visitors are oblivious to is a dark secret. Lurking just below the square lies an old dungeon and a series of creepy jail cells that once housed Montreal's most wretched and miserable prisoners, including those awaiting execution. It is the site of the first Montreal Prison, a notorious jail where inmates were locked up in dangerous and unsanitary conditions. The prison also hosted live executions, where cheering crowds on the Champ de Mars witnessed criminals being hanged from the scaffold erected in front of the prison's wall. The old jail cells are currently off limits to the public and are rumored to be haunted, possibly by the ghosts of criminals long since executed. These inaccessible cells are overseen now by the city's finance department, which is based in the Old Courthouse. According to rumors, many city workers avoid the old dungeon because of the horrible feelings produced while inside the cells, including shortness of breath, a sense of claustrophobia, and feelings of fear and dread. Paranormal cold spots are also reported to materialize in certain cells, where the temperature can drop rapidly without warning. Muffled sounds can sometimes be heard in the jail, including the clanking of chains and rough, disembodied voices murmuring incomprehensibly. Maintenance staff avoid the area whenever possible, and access to the old jail cells is strictly limited to the city's administration. Looking at the history of the site, the first structure built was a house for Jesuit priests in 1692, during the New France era. At the time, a rudimentary French prison was located in the northwest corner of Notre Dame and Saint Laurent. When the British took over the city in 1760, they seized the Jesuits' property and converted it into a house of detention in 1768. In 1803, a fire damaged the building, and plans were made to erect a new prison. By now, Montreal's population was bursting. The old stone walls from the New France era were demolished, and a new field called the Champ de Mars was laid out. Named after the Roman god of war, Mars, the field was designed for military drills, leisurely promenading, and large public gatherings. In 1808, to the south of this field, construction began on a new jail. Designed by Joseph Corset, Montreal Prison opened its doors to inmates in 1811. Prisoners included vagrants, prostitutes, citizens awaiting trial, convicts serving sentences, and condemned criminals contemplating their scheduled executions. Executions were very popular in Montreal, and under British law, hangings were meant to take place at the site of the jail. The Champ de Mars was seen as the absolute best place in the British Empire to witness a hanging, on account of the large field and the sloping geography, and Montreal citizens were treated to a total of 44 hangings during the prison's brief existence. Families would often pack a picnic lunch and bring the children to teach them the values of obedience. The executions began in 1812 when one D. McDougall was sentenced to be hanged after having been caught stealing in a shop. His body was then given over to anatomy. As the years passed, others were hanged for such crimes as burglary, shoplifting, horse stealing, forgery, larceny, rape, and murder. Some of the executions raised eyebrows, such as that of a 13-year-old boy named B. Clement, who was hanged in 1813 for stealing a cow. Or in 1817, when one Monsieur Gendron dropped from the gallows for sacrilege. The final execution at Montreal Prison occurred at around 10 a.m. on Friday, August 30th, 1833. The star attraction was a man named Adolphus Dewey, who had murdered his young wife, Euphrasie Martineau, in a fit of jealousy. After slashing her wrists and throat with a razor, Adolphus fled to the United States, where he was soon arrested and brought promptly back to Montreal to be thrown into the dungeon of Montreal Prison. He awaited trial in chains for 4 months before being found guilty of murder. Adolphus spent his final days shackled in chains, praying and reading his Bible. He accepted a religious visitor, an American evangelist named Nancy Towle, who wanted to assure his salvation. Adolphus explained to her that because he had repented to God, he would soon be reunited with his beautiful wife, Euphrasie, in heaven, which I'm sure Euphrasie was incredibly excited for. Nancy Towle recorded Adolphus's final words and her thoughts for posterity in a document titled Some of the Writings and Last Sentences of Adolphus Dewey. For his execution, Adolphus asked to wear a nice black suit, and he requested that a constable hold up a copy of his last words. On the scaffold, Adolphus gave a rousing speech where he apologized to the citizens, accepted responsibility for his crimes, told the spectators that he had found God, and implored them to pray for his soul. As a grim finale, when he dropped from the scaffold, Adolphus's neck did not snap. Instead, he twisted and contorted in a tight noose, gasping and frothing at the mouth for a full 4 minutes before he expired. It was the most popular execution in Montreal history and witnessed over 10,000 people in attendance. Despite the popularity of live executions among citizens, Montreal Prison was also described as a corrupt place. For example, in 1817, a party of fur traders who belonged to the Nor'westerners were arrested and put in the prison. Known as the Nabobs of the North, the fur merchants used political connections and vast amounts of wealth to ensure lavish parties were hosted inside the jail until their associates were freed. There were also rumors that bribery could help with escape, and the jailer and his son were known to take advantage of incarcerated prostitutes for sexual gratification. Are we surprised? The conditions inside Montreal Prison were wretched and dreadful. The overcrowded jail stank and was infested with vermin. In the summer, it was stifling hot, whereas in the winter, the prison was barely heated. Freezing winds and drifting snow whistled through broken panes, making the jail extremely cold. Inmates were forced to sleep in bare cells on the floor, sometimes on a bed of filthy straw, with an inadequate number of blankets. Prisoners awaiting trial or execution were chained to the wall while they slept. Food consisted of only bread and water, with a rare treat of watery broth containing bits of mystery meat on Sundays and holidays. Prisoners, of course, were also treated inhumanely. According to History of the Montreal Prison by Reverend J.D. Borthwick, disobedient inmates were forced into the dark cell for an extended period, a type of solitary confinement in complete blackness. Other prisoners were branded on the hand with a hot iron in the shape of a crown. During this painful torture, criminals had to cry out, "Long live the king," 3 times before the red-hot iron was pulled from their blistering skin. If it was a soldier being branded, the iron had letters instead of a crown, with BC standing for bad conduct and D for desertion. Other popular forms of punishment were delivered in public, directly across Notre Dame Street, at the base of Nelson's Column. The column was erected in 1809 as an homage to British naval hero Admiral Horatio Nelson. Montreal's citizens could often enjoy a spectacle at the southern base of the monument designed to humiliate criminals who had been found guilty of lesser crimes. The common hangman who lived in Montreal Prison was known to whip criminals and rebellious prisoners on this spot with a cat-o'-nine-tails, a type of whip with 9 strands designed to inflict the maximum amount of pain. Victims were lashed 39 times each in the name of tradition. Authorities would also restrain certain prisoners in a pillory and invite citizens to throw garbage at them, including the horse droppings that littered Place Jacques-Cartier, which was then a bustling marketplace. This public retribution was seen as a good way to collectively punish and shame criminals while simultaneously discouraging others from committing the same crime. By 1835, Montreal Prison was starting to deteriorate. The building began to crumble, and with severe overcrowding, conditions on the inside were worsening. It reached a point of crisis in December when the emaciated, frozen corpse of an almost naked man was discovered in a cell one morning. The jailer identified him as one of the prisoners, John Collins, a starving and malnourished vagrant who had actually frozen to death in Montreal Prison one cold December night. A grand jury was immediately assembled to examine the issue. After investigating, they issued a damning report about the Montreal prison, noting that the jail was falling into ruins after only 27 years of existence, and that the conditions inside were utterly appalling. The report noted that the food was inadequate, the prison was not properly heated in the winter, inmates were crammed into freezing cells at night with no beds, and there were only 54 blankets for 84 prisoners, many of whom lacked clothing, wearing nothing but rags. Prisoners awaiting trial or execution were also kept in chains. Not only was the prison miserable and overcrowded, but the report also noted that the jailer and his son took sexual advantage of a total of 37 prostitutes who were locked up at the time. In 1836, Sainte Marie Prison, later renamed Pied de Coron, was erected to the east, near the shoreline at St. Mary's Current. The Old Montreal Prison was converted into a house of industry, a place where vagrants could work. However, in 1837, the building was again pressed into service as a jail. A rebellion by les Patriotes generated excessive amounts of prisoners. In 1838, Montreal Prison was at last closed permanently as a jail. For a few years, it was used to headquarter artillery officers, and in 1846, the prison was finally demolished to make way for the new courthouse. During the demolition, it was decided to preserve the old jail cells to serve as a foundation for the new courthouse and a public square, initially called Place Neptune, on the eastern portion of the old jail. Today, the old dungeon and its storied cells, lurking just below Place Vauquelin, are strictly off-limits. It is difficult to obtain any information from city authorities about this forbidden area. While official City of Montreal archivists and guides often claim to have no knowledge of any hauntings, sometimes one of them will relay a rumor they have heard. As such, it's difficult to speculate exactly who or what may be haunting the old dungeon cells of Montreal Prison. For example, the mysterious cold spots could be related to vagrant John Collins, who froze to death in the dungeon in 1835. As for the disembodied murmuring voices, these are extremely difficult to place, but could be connected to the prayers of Adolphus Dewey, who may not have been accepted into heaven to be reunited with his wife Euphrosyne after all. Indeed, many spectators who witnessed his execution felt that his prolonged and torturous death was evidence of God's displeasure, and that it was a case of poetic justice. Could the ghost of Adolphus Dewey haunt the cells, praying for a retribution that will never come? The paranormal activities could also be related to dozens of other criminals who were hanged at the prison, such as B. Clement, the 13-year-old boy found guilty of stealing a cow. One thing is certain, more research is needed into the exact nature of the hauntings in the cells to gather more details to try and make more specific connections. At the time of Donovan's original blog on this topic, and as I'm filming this video, Haunted Montreal is trying to gain access to the old dungeon of Montreal Prison, so far with no success. From 2015 to 2017, an archaeological dig was scheduled, along with repairs to the foundation of City Hall and a $12 million facelift to Place Vauquelin. However, news of these activities dropped off 5 years ago, and we never did hear what was found in the soil of Place Vauquelin. Here at Haunted Montreal, we would not be surprised if the workers unearthed a lot more than they bargained for. Whatever the case, we will continue to monitor the situation closely and be prepared to create a follow-up video. Are you a Montreal resident or a tourist who's felt something strange when visiting Place Vauquelin? Have you ever had access to these restricted cells? If so, we would love to hear about it. As always, we want to hear your theories about what could be going on. Thank you so much for stopping by. If it's your first video, we do hope you'll stick around for the next one. We post videos in both French and English every Saturday. If you'd like to learn more about the organization founded by Donovan King, it's all listed in the description below. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment. We'll have a new video out next Saturday, but until then, stay spooky.